Hi, last night I watched Chaos Walking, the somewhat troubled adaptation of Patrick Ness's book, The Life of Never Letting Go, a film having been released earlier this year. It went through a very troubled production period. It had been in development for a decade. Many writers had worked on it, including Charlie Kaufman. Um, and the final credit is to Ness himself and co-writer Christopher Ford. And even then, once filming had taken place with Doug Liman directing, reshoots were ordered, conducted by Fede Alvarez, conducted 2 years later. The film then had its release date postponed yet again. It finally came out earlier this year, 4 years after being originally filmed. It's a science fiction adventure starring Daisy Ridley and Tom Holland, and is set on the colony planet of New World, where um, men's thoughts are visible above their heads and audible and are referred to as noise. The town of Prentice Town, led by Mayor Prentice, played by Mads Mikkelsen, has no women. All the women were apparently killed by alien creatures that live on the planet called spackle. So they're rather startled and surprised when a young woman arrives from a crashed ship, played by Daisy Ridley, and she is to be conducted to a nearby town by a young man played by Tom Holland, who has formed an attachment to her, while the town's elders from Prentice Town move in pursuit because they don't want their secret to be found out. It's quite a convoluted setup for quite a difficult concept. I haven't read the book, but I can imagine that it works relatively well on the page because it can be selective about how much of the noise you're able to see and hear and perceive through the author's voice. But in the film, basically every male character has like a thought bubble above their head all the time, which is visually quite distracting and wildly labor intensive for production. The problem, though, is that the actual story is very simplistic. Um, it's quite a short film. It runs barely 100, actually less than 100 minutes without credits. And the villains are villains, the heroes are heroes. It's all very, very straightforward and clean cut. The film's ultimate message is um, standing in opposition to misogyny and sexism, um, and about men who feel diminished and scared of women having power over them, and how pathetic and weak these men actually are because they cannot cope with this threat to their masculinity. So the message is a good one. It's just a shame that the delivery system is quite uninteresting and quite poorly handled. Holland and Ridley are perfectly acceptable in their roles. The direction is serviceable at best. Lyman is a wildly variable director. And the whole thing is just has very much has a sense of that'll do to it. The fact that it went through so many hands in the writing phase meant that it's had any kind of interesting lumps and bumps and quirks ironed out. It's very plain and schematic. It's quite bland, really. It's not really a surprise that it was a giant bomb at the box office because, who's going to venture out to the cinema at a time like this to see something that's had this trouble to production and is so doomed, effectively. So it's really not very good, and I wouldn't waste your time with it if I were you.